event of the 30th court. Can you imagine? 30 courts. Some of you are here for the very first, I know. You're all welcome here for the 30th. And this plaque unveiling, and it's part of a day of celebrations of Yeats, whose sesquicentenary is being celebrated all over the world. The art poet W.B. Yeats. And Court is not behind in celebrating, so I know that many of you are going on a fantastic, magical mystery ride around the countryside that Yeats loved so much now and loved so much in. Now, Galway City wouldn't be the first location you think of when you're thinking of W.B. Yeats, but in George Moore's magnificent memoir, Hail and Farewell, there's a passage about W.B. Yeats, George Moore and Edward Martin playing hooky from a feis ceoil somewhere at the far end of town and going in a sunny ramble through Galway, as indeed we all have. And they finished up in Galway's very own Bridge of Sighs, the Salmon Weir Bridge there. And George Moore wrote a lovely piece about Galway and Yeats, as Yeats and he gazed into the waters of the Corrib. And that's the piece of prose that Court at Galway City Council, working together, chose this year for its Heart of the Yeats celebration. So we hope that all the people wandering around this riverbank, locals and visitors alike, might stop for a moment at this modest plaque and read the words and think about the great guys. So, as I said, it's the first event in Court this year, and we have a very distinguished gathering. We have, of course, the Mayor of Galway, Councillor Donal Lyons, who was once a Sligo man, but following the footsteps of W.B. Yeats, he has indeed decided that Galway is a much more interesting place to set down roots. We have the magnificent Sister Delúrd Fahey, who is the arch and supreme mythologizer and historian of South County Galway, of all the people who lived in and around Yeats' country, of Lady Gregory and Tour Ballydee and Cool, and she's going to be the guide in the Magical Mystery Tour later on. We have Tom Kenny, who came up with the idea of immortalising great writing about Galway in these plaques all these years ago. And of course we have Danny Gill, who's the director of Court and has done such a magnificent job in the last few years of bringing Court to a new standard. Absolutely brilliant work here. And we also have Gary McMahon, the acting Senior Executive Officer for Culture in Galway City Council, a man who, in negotiating terms in the current cool and hip phrase, knows how to put a dead cat on a table. So it's a great gathering here. But our guest of honour, the person who is going to unveil the plaque and speak, say a few words, and who's actually taller than I am, hence this very high microphone, is Martin Dyer. Martin went to NUI, the fantastic NUI Galway, the fantastic college behind us. He also went to Trinity. He's from Swinford in County Mayo, but he was also born in Sligo. For some reason, he also moved out. He's received many numbers, many honours in poetry, including the Patrick Kavanagh Poetry Award in 2009, the Strokestown International Poetry Award in 2001, and he was actually the director of the Strokestown Poetry Festival as well. He was selected for the Poetry Ireland Introduction Series in 2010, and he was writer in residence at the International Writing Programme at the University of Iowa. He's received Arts Council Literature Bursary Awards, and he was shortlisted for the 2014 Pigott Prize. He also fronts a fantastic, extremely cool alt country rock band, and I suppose the highlight of his career was appearing for us at Culture Night 2012 in Nuns Island. But to speak to us further about all the great shenanigans back in the days of the Anglo-Irish literary revival, and properly to mark the occasion, I give you the poet, the fantastic musician, the poet, and our good friend, Mr. Martin Dyer.
Thank you very much, James. Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to be here. The idea of taking pieces of writing, pieces of poetry, and inscribing them on stone and then giving them a permanent location in the city seems a kind of beautiful investment. As Guy Clark once sang, "There ain't no money in poetry, but that's what sets the poet free." In marking the 150th birthday of W.B. Yeats, we encounter the non-monetary value of poetry, the potential of a life dedicated to words to manifest in the end something of lasting significance. A life's work that seeks to probe and defend the mystery of existence and to push the limits of expression as a means of declaring more fully what it means to be human. Through this achievement, W.B. Yeats possessed and still possesses for us the power of representing poetry, the power of embodying poetry with all of its possible meanings. W.B. Yeats is, in a sense, the common ground of poetry itself. Many of us will be heading south now quite shortly in search of the poet, and no doubt we will get special glimpses of the man behind the work and a draft or two of the myths he built around himself. I referred to what we're doing this morning as a beautiful investment. There's no materialistic air to what we are doing in this moment. But these words work in another sense, maybe, insofar as this plaque is an investment in beauty. The inscription that is being unveiled this morning will be part of a network of similar sites around the city. Pieces of fiction and poetry in both Irish and English, literally set in stone. It's a poetry trail in tourist terms, but it is, of course, something more powerful for the fact that it cannot be taken in one day. It cannot be walked around in sequence, and most people will not seek these monuments out directly. These specially chosen poems and excerpts are there to rather interrupt us and to usher us for a moment into the quietness of their voices, into their glow, into their depth. And these encounters will always be encounters with ourselves. Firstly, in the form of our shared history, our heritage. But they can also, of course, prompt something more personal, more private, more emotional. When we continue strolling after reading one of the inscriptions on the poetry trail, we sense what we are when we have been suspended in a moment of reflection. This feeling, I would suggest, is one of the ancient faces of poetry itself. I recall the first day that I saw Rita Ann Higgins' poem, Men with Tired Hair, the immortally titled Men with Tired Hair, outside Richardson's pub on Eyre Square. It seemed right that the poem should be married so assuredly to a piece of real Galway. It is a poem that makes a lasting image of those who do not realise that they have been seen. And not only seen, but held in the mind's eye and known at once with colloquial and philosophical grace. And then represented with the kind of delicacy and power that can only come from the pen of one who has given their life to poetry. I also recognised, I think, the men that Rita Ann was singing about. And this feeling of being transported more deeply into Galway City was enhanced by the sense that the inscribed poem also represented the ethos of the city, the ethos of Galway City, its tradition of writing, its passionate habit of listening to its writers and of speaking to its visitors through specific cultural forms and occasions. Another poem on our poetry trail is Seamus Heaney's Girls Bathing, Galway, 1965, located beside Ladies' Beach in Salt Hill. I personally have stopped and read this one many times. The mighty words, the elemental images, seem to know the presence of the sun and the rain in that part of the city. They seem to be at home looking across the bay to the coast of Clare. And the social warmth of the poem itself seems to participate in the life of Galway City milling past, the rhythm and the intimacy and the tradition of the prom. The poem is like a double signal of meditation and celebration, with its spirit of praise for Irish women as somehow perennially girlish and perennially free in themselves. They They are goddesses, all of them, Heaney tells us, even if life interrupts their divinity. It's a poem that literally stops time as a natural function of itself, and it's being rendered so permanently by the city, by ourselves. For these are communal gestures. In that way, seems to guarantee this function, while adding a further Galway-based salute to timelessness. As with Seamus Heaney, so it is with W.B. Yeats. In the scene that is remembered in this new inscription, it is water that was the key to meditation, water that promotes the dream. The words on this inscription are from the memoir Hail and Farewell by George Moore, and I'm going to read you a few lines from a passage that precedes the excerpt that's been used, to give you a little bit of the sense of the two men. I hesitate to call them friends because they didn't like each other very much. But here it is. There were more rights. There were other idlers besides ourselves enjoying the fair weather. And their arms resting on the stone bridge, they looked into the brown, rippling water, remarking from time to time that the river was very low. No one had seen it ever lower before, and that the fish would have to wait a long time before there was sufficient water for them to get up to the weir. But my eyes could not distinguish a fish until Yeats told me to look straight down through the brown water. And I saw one, and immediately afterwards a second and a third and a fourth, and then the great shoal, hundreds, thousands of salmon, each fish keeping its place in the current, a slight movement of the tail being sufficient. And the words that are inscribed, and which I will presently unveil, are the following. A lovely day it was, the town lying under a white canopy of cloud, not a wind in all the air, but a line of houses, sheer and dim, along the river, mingling with grey shadows. And on the other bank, there were waste places, difficult to account for, ruins showing dimly through the soft, diffused light like old castles. But Yeats said they were the ruins of ancient mills, for Galway had once been a prosperous town. Maybe, my spirit answered, but less beautiful than she is today. This new inscription enters directly into the circle of words that have been carefully written and carefully presented, both in their origins and in their afterlife as monuments to a culture of reflection. They can help us to see Galway and to see ourselves, much as Yeats helped Moore to see the salmon on that glorious remembered day, which now, from this moment onwards, cannot be forgotten.